it's Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD. I'm here to help you create a great life by achieving a strong mind, a healthy body, and an unshakable spirit. What I'd like to talk about today is what causes anxiety and the physical symptoms arising from it. It's a big question. Anxiety, we all have it. And as we talk about it, what I'd like to do first is perform a little bit of brain surgery. That's right, take out the scalpels. If you're a little bit queasy with blood, well, I'm sorry about that, but actually you'll be okay because there's no blood. But we're going to dissect to understand really what's happening when somebody experiences anxiety. Well, it all goes back, 10, 20, 30, 200,000 years ago, even longer than that. Before Homo sapiens walked the earth, which was about 250,000 years ago, our prehistoric ancestors, well, it was really a activity for survival, just survival. That's the only thing. It's breathing, eating, and avoiding danger. And the nervous system, the very primitive nervous system that all living animals, including Homo sapiens, had and still have, is what was called the reptilian nervous system. And this is the nervous system that our prehistoric relatives and animals and dinosaurs had. And that reptilian brain, that reptilian system was, as I said, a two-pronged system. Only one or two responses. It's fight or flight. And it responds to any possibility of danger, threat, or vulnerability. And then that's going to trigger it, and it's going to cause that fight or flight. Well, something happened with humankind around 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. It actually coincided with the end of the Ice Age and the beginning of the modern period, which was more of an agricultural period. And during that time, Homo sapiens drifted away from the other animals, and we started to have thoughts. So those thoughts actually could be the source of danger, causing fight or flight. And I'm going to talk to you about that in a little bit. So you have that reptilian system, and that reptilian system is reliant on a part of the brain, a very small, about the size of an almond, which is called the amygdala. And what the amygdala does is it will process our five senses, and only process our five senses for danger. So if we sense through our eyes, through our ears, through our taste, through our smell, through our touch, anything that might remotely cause us to think that there might be danger, threat, or vulnerability to us, it's going to go through the amygdala. The amygdala is going to send a signal to a place nearby called the hypothalamus, which then sends signals to what's called the pituitary to unleash a battery of messages in our body to cause us to either fight or flee. Well, again, this system is very primitive, and you could observe it in your everyday life or just go into nature and look at a squirrel, for instance. A squirrel is darting around, stopping, darting. And that is an example of the fight or flight, because that animal is in a constant state of fear. And that fear is from the possible danger that they have instinctive knowledge of. Do you think that a squirrel actually is thinking that a hawk could come down and grab it? Or some predator like a fox can get it? No, but it has that instinct. So any type of sense that it feels, it will stimulate the fight or flight. And that's exactly what happens in us humans. We now, our physical manifestation, anxiety is the physical manifestation of the fight or flight response. Anytime you feel anxiety, that is the fight or flight response. And it always comes from somewhere. There's always an origin for the fight or flight response. There's always an origin for danger. It comes from somewhere. The animals that we observe in nature, it's obvious where the danger comes from. But with us humans, it's very difficult to really know where the danger is coming from, because the fight or flight response is a generic response. It responds to anything that our amygdala, will discern what is danger or not. And that's from our five senses. But when was the last time really, it does happen, but when was the last time really that you had to fight off a predator, or that you had to flee from a predator? It does happen, we know that. But that would be a fight or flight coming from our experience. That would be from our environment. That would be the same type of fight or flight that the animal kingdom responds to. But what happened in humankind, and what separates us from the animals, is that we have a more evolved brain, We have a more evolved, and that sounds like it's better, but actually it's not, because our fight or flight has become more sophisticated. It has become more developed. And that's really why we have anxiety. You ask yourself, do animals really experience anxiety? They just experience the fight or flight response. They don't interpret it as an anxiety. We interpret it as anxiety because we get the fight or flight response, but there's really nothing to fight and there's nothing to flee. That will cause us to internalize it. And what it does, it causes things to happen on our physical body that causes discomfort and actually dis-ease in some cases, because it will cause our muscles to contract. It'll cause all sorts of physical symptoms, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But that more evolved brain has allowed us to respond not only to our physical environment, but also our internal environment. That is what has happened with our modern day fight or flight, which translates into anxiety. And as I said, it always has an origin. So where is the origin? Well, if you're in your car riding on the highway and all of a sudden someone starts honking their horn and cutting you off, that is a trigger, right? That is a external. It's an automatic response that you have. You feel your heart rate maybe beat a little quicker, and that's because that is a potential predator. That's a potential enemy to attack you that you might need to fight or flee. So your brain automatically, instantaneously is getting you ready for that. But what if you have a thought that you're going to school for the first time, and you think in your head, oh my goodness, I'm not ready, I'm not prepared, I'm going to be embarrassed. All those things start going through. So those are the internal thoughts that stimulate the fight or flight. And they are also processed through your emotions, which are processed through the same exact mechanism as the external stuff, the predators, whatever. So the same reaction happens. It's generic. It doesn't discriminate. If anything signals danger, it is going to go off and it's going to trigger. So that is really how the anxiety will develop. That's the origins of the anxiety that human beings have. And as I talk more, you'll understand that there are certain particulars, actually, all of us experience that can be symbols of danger, threat, or vulnerability to stimulate that fight or flight response. There was a study that was done a few years ago that looked at the male brain and the female brain. And a lot of people will think that, well, men are much more aggressive than women, and their fight or flight is much stronger and much more prominent, and women don't have it as much. But I know you watching, men and women experience anxiety, right? Well, the anxiety is the fight or flight. So what this study looked at was what happens in that part of the brain that processes the fight or flight. And it turns out that both are stimulated, But the fight or flight looks a little different. In men, yes, the fight or flight seems to be more physical, whereas in the women, it becomes more emotional. So you may see it in the different behaviors. So if you've experienced anxiety, you may act out, a male might act out more physically, a woman might act out more emotionally. But emotionally could be words, could be, even passive aggressiveness, whereas the male maybe have the aggressiveness. And again, this is gender neutral, okay? But there are differences between men and women, and there are differences between male and female brains and how we experience anxiety. But the bottom line is we all experience anxiety. It doesn't matter. And that anxiety comes from internal stimulus, external stimulus, and once its signal of danger, that little almond-shaped place in our brain, it sends a signal to release adrenaline and to release the hormones cortisol, adrenaline and cortisol. And we're going to talk about how that will affect our body and what actually signals danger to cause that reaction. There is a big myth, and the myth is that anxiety is a disorder, and you may have been told that you have anxiety disorder. And that makes it seem as though it's different, like not everybody gets it. But the reality is that everybody experiences anxiety because every living organism has a fight or flight response. And when you respond to danger, it will cause the release of adrenaline and cortisol, which causes all those uncomfortable feelings. Humans are different from animals, though. And the way they're different from animals is that animals will, as I said before, will react to external stimuli, where humans will react to both internal and external. But it turns out that there are 3 very particular danger triggers that all living beings will respond to. And because that's why I say this is a myth, that there is anxiety disorder. Look, some people have it worse than others, and I will explain in other videos why that is. But the bottom line is that there are only 3 danger triggers that will cause this fight or flight reaction. The first is what I call the one-up danger trigger. The one-up danger trigger means that anytime an organism, let's say humans, anytime I get information that's fed me either externally or internally, that some person, place, or thing has the ability to dominate me, to crush me, for instance, okay, then that fight or flight will be triggered. And it goes from very small organisms to very large organisms. So take a spider, for instance. Now, a spider, arguably, really not arguably, a spider doesn't think, it only reacts. So let's say you're walking by a gate and there's a spider that has spun a web on the gate and you knock against the gate. That spider will scurry very quickly underneath to try to hide. It just reacts. Now, how does it know? Well, it knows because ingrained, it has the one-up danger. It has been evolved. It's instinctual in that small spider that one-up, something that is one-up, that causes a very large vibration, has the ability to snuff it out. It's automatic, doesn't think it. It's just that's a survival instinct. So it will react that way. So let's take a higher organism, like a human being. What if you're asked all of a sudden to speak publicly? Or what if you're in a crowded room and listening to a speaker and the speaker calls on you? What happens? Instantaneously, I could almost predict, you'll feel your heart race, you'll feel a little weak or shaky. And that is the one-up trigger. Why? Because you have the risk of being embarrassed. What that translates into is the risk of destruction, of hurt, of pain, of maybe domination. So it's an instantaneous reaction to cause that fight or flight. And what does the fight or flight? You say that you're anxious, you're nervous. Well, there are all sorts of internal and external triggers that we process that will cause us to have it, that reaction. But what I want you to really get and take home is that everybody and everything experiences this. So don't label yourself with a disorder. Label yourself with a human disorder, and then by listening to my videos or reading some of my work, leaving comments below. Please leave comments below and let me know some of the things that trigger you. Very, very important to share that so other people can know that they're not alone. So the second trigger, the second big trigger, is what I call the unknown, the uncomfortable, the unfamiliar, the unexpected. Now, that is, I think we all know what that's like, going outside of our comfort zone, right? The uncomfortable, the unknown, the unfamiliar. That is, again, instinctive. In any animal species, they will be very tentative going into a place that is that they haven't experienced before. And so you know that. I know you know that. You know that if you go to an unfamiliar place, you're going to feel anxious. Well, what is that anxious? Well, that anxious is the unfamiliar, the uncomfortable, the unexpected, the unknown or the abnormal deviation from your norm. And that is an automatic trigger for the fight or flight. That will cause your brain to produce adrenaline and cortisol so you could be prepared to fight or flee, because that's danger. And we know that there's a saying that that everything that we want in life is outside of our comfort zone. But we know that when we take one step out of our comfort zone and then we take another step, we look around and go, oh my goodness, how did I get here? And oftentimes we step back. And that's because our anxiety, fight or flight, is trying to protect us. It's trying to protect us from something actually we need no protection from. It's really where we want to go. So that's important to understand. The fight or flight, we don't want to trust it, take direction from it, or believe it, because it's going to derail us. And especially with this particular trigger, the unknown, the uncomfortable, prevents so much growth, so much success. But that's what anxiety is. It is the result of us venturing into that. The third trigger, main trigger across all species, is the threat of losing love. Now, you might wonder, what is that all about, losing love? Well, it's been shown, and in a very infamous gorilla experiment, they removed a baby gorilla from its mother, put it in a very pristine environment, where they gave it all the food it needed, all anything it needed. Okay, they gave this gorilla everything. Yet the gorilla withdrew and started to decline, and it refuse eating because it didn't have that love. But in the animal kingdom, love is really security. And it's obvious then, if we have the threat of losing love, it means losing security. Some people may argue that dogs experience love. Now, I love my dog. Okay? I think my dog loves me. But does it really experience love, or is it security? Is it the fear or the danger of losing security? If that security is threatened, you're threatened to lose it, then your brain will trigger fight or flight. You'll feel anxious. And you'll see that with toddlers or children when they act out. There's a saying that all behavior, all attention-seeking behavior, all negative behavior is just attention-seeking behavior, bad or good. Okay, a child will act out badly just so the child can be assured that the parent is still there, securing them and loving them. So you'll see that in adult life, how many relationships or that you stay in because it's secure. We fight against that because all of a sudden that relationship is in danger of losing it. We'll fight or flee, we'll feel anxious, but our behavior then will try to get it back so we can secure it back again. Anxiety is not something to believe, trust, or take direction from because it doesn't really tell us what is good for us in life. It only tells us what we need to fight or flee that's perceived danger, when oftentimes that danger is really not dangerous. So those are the three main danger triggers that we all have. The one-up danger trigger, the unknown, uncomfortable, unfamiliar, unexpected, abnormal danger trigger, and the loss of love danger trigger. And also remember that all of us experience that. So when you label yourself having an anxiety disorder, you are telling yourself that you somehow are different and you're somehow abnormal. Well, don't do that to yourself because everyone experiences it. And behind every anxiety is a trigger. Never comes out of the blue, never is in a vacuum. Something always triggers it. A one-up trigger, a unknown, uncomfortable trigger, or a loss of love trigger. Whenever we feel this anxiety, whenever the fight or flight is triggered, it releases that flurry of hormones that we talked about, and anxiety, the feeling of anxiety happens. And what is that a feeling of anxiety? Well, the feeling of anxiety is physical, and it causes real physical symptoms. And those physical symptoms many times will be interpreted as being sick. I'm sick, because it does feel sick. It really does. It's a terrible feeling. And those hormones will live in the body. Really, they have what's called a half-life. So they'll float around in the body, but if you do nothing, if you don't feed it, then half of those hormones will be gone in a minute and a half. Then half of that will be gone in another minute and a half. So really, in the course of about 5 minutes, if you do nothing to feed it, that anxiety will disappear, that anxiety feeling. You may be left with some type of uncomfortable feelings, but the real hardcore symptoms will be gone. And that's important to know, because when I say don't feed it again, these hormones will prepare you to fight or flee. So they will cause you to have a tension in the muscles, let's say, muscles all throughout the body. One of those big muscles are the muscles around the chest. And what is the organ that sits below that muscle? Well, it's the heart. And we all get scared if we have chest pain, because chest pain means that we're having a heart attack, right? Well, not always. In fact, usually it doesn't, especially in young people. I'd say 99.99% of the time means that you're not having a heart attack. It means that you have fight or flight that's causing the symptoms of anxiety, that's causing your muscles to tense up because it's ready to fight, right, or flee, and that's going to cause that physical symptom. Well, if you trust or have the thought now, the internal thought, that chest pain is your heart, that's going to be another danger. And when you have another danger, it's going to produce more fight or flight. And it'll just keep going on and on. So that's what I mean when you don't feed it. Understand the different symptoms that anxiety causes. Chest pain is a big one. And let me give you a disclaimer. I'm not saying to listen to me. I know that your pain is anxiety. If you have pains, go to your doctor immediately. Call your doctor or 911, whatever. But if you get a clear bill of health, don't keep thinking something's wrong with you. Understand that many times physical symptoms come from that fight or flight and are anxiety symptoms. Chest pain is a big one. Another one is shortness of breath. Now, think about what you need to do if you need to fight or flee. You need to breathe. You need to get oxygen. And so it's an automatic reflex. Danger, fight or flight, cause you to breathe fast. And it causes you to breathe fast so you can exchange oxygen fast. Well, if you don't have any place to really fight or flee, which most of the times you don't, that ends up causing you to breathe a little bit too fast. In fact, it causes you to hyperventilate. When you hyperventilate, you're exchanging much more, you're getting rid of carbon dioxide, you're inhaling oxygen, it's happening very quickly. And what that does to the brain, it causes your brain, first of all, causes you to have a sensation of being out of breath and having to take a big sigh. And a lot of times you can't even get that deep breath because the chest tightness is preventing you. So that makes you more nervous and more anxious and causes that fight or flight to keep feeding itself. But also when you get rid of the carbon dioxide, it causes your fingertips to all of a sudden tingle and you feel shaky and your brain is foggy. You can't have complex thoughts. So even if you're not panting like a dog, right, you are hyperventilating. You're exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide at a very rapid pace. So it's causing physical symptoms. And not only is it causing physical symptoms, it's also feeding that danger, fight, or flight cycle. Because again, remember, the amygdala, that almond-shaped part of your brain, is sending signals of danger to the hypothalamus, to the pituitary, and it releases these hormones that will cause these symptoms. So if you're interpreting your physical symptoms as something dangerous, threatening, or feeling of vulnerability, it will cause you to keep that cycle going. So when I said the half-life, when it diminishes in a minute and a half, let's say, and then a half and a minute and a half from there and go on, when it's almost gone by 5 minutes, if you keep feeding it, it's going to send you to the emergency room because you're going to be so frantic. So it's important to know that that can cause that. The real challenge is that if you're in a constant state of fight or flight, meaning your circumstances are such that you're constantly being triggered by certain pressures, whether it's in your family, in your job, then this can cause a chronic cycle of fight or flight, which might cause chronic muscular skeletal problems like back pain, hip pain, knee pain, and it might make you want to just not do anything. And just keep in mind what I keep saying, what I've said a lot in this video, is that anxiety is not a good thing to believe, trust, or take direction from. Give us your comments and tell me tell others the physical symptoms that you feel and how you might deal with that in the comments, because it's really helpful to share this information in real time to let people know not to always believe, trust, and take direction from these symptoms. There's so many other symptoms. One of the major ones that people get are heart racing or palpitations. It's very unnerving to feel your heart jump in your chest. I recall when I was in medical school, the second year of medical school, we took our blood pressure, and I had always had normal blood pressure, but we were studying for the second part of our board exam. And I remember feeling my heart skip a beat a little bit. So I asked my roommate to take my blood pressure. And my blood pressure was 130/80. It's no big deal. 130/80, it's really not a big deal. But I was a second year medical student studying for my boards. Everything was a big deal, right? So all of a sudden, I thought I had high blood pressure. My heart was skipping a beat. It must be, I was 23 years old, okay? It's not happening. My heart's fine. But I went to my parents and they took me to the cardiologist who tried to reassure me. But by then I was totally crazy, okay? And my heartbeat was fast. That's all fight or flight. There was a danger that I might have been having some heart problem. And that sent me into a tizzy. And in fact, to this day, I still sometimes get nervous, anxious when somebody's going to take my blood pressure. I know not to believe, trust, or take direction from it because my blood pressure is fine. I'm grateful. I'm fit. I'm in good shape. I do very aggressive exercises. And I know that my cardiovascular system is strong. If I didn't know that, and here I was 23 years old telling myself that I had a heart problem, that triggered danger, fight or flight, anxiety. The way I got over that is I didn't believe, trust, or take direction from it. And I went forward. And that's why it's important to understand where these physical symptoms are coming from. That anxiety will cause physical symptoms just because of the mechanism that causes what we call anxiety, which is the fight or flight, which always has a trigger. So hopefully that you found this video valuable. Please comment, like, and share on Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. And for those of you who haven't yet, support my Patreon campaign. This way I can be up close and personal with much more practical and how-to videos that I feel will really benefit you and help you with your life. So until next time, I'm Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD, wishing you to stay strong in mind, in body, and in soul. Bye for now. Hey, Dr. Charles, CoachMD. Thanks for stopping by. Make sure to like and comment below. I'd love to hear from you. If you think you have a friend who might benefit from this video, share it with them. For access to exclusive content, support my Patreon. There you'll get private access to videos, meditations, health tips, even relationship and financial tips. You'll have a say in what I produce and be able to participate in a monthly call with me. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you soon.